is Dr. Janine Abrams McLean, Vice President of Fair Count. I hope that you and your family are safe and healthy during this time. We are delighted that Black women from across Louisiana are joining us this evening for a discussion on the critical importance of the 2020 census and what it means for Black women and Black families. We're holding this Sisters for the Census Tele-Town Hall event as a part of our Census in the South Road to Recovery virtual bus tour. And this bus tour is in partnership with Pluribus Unum. The road to recovery from COVID-19 is going to be long, but we will get there. And when we do, we need to be sure that our communities have thriving economies, fully funded health care in case we get sick, schools that are not overcrowded, and programs for all of our kids who need them. We have an exciting slate of Black women from across Louisiana tonight. This is an interactive conversation. If you'd like to ask a question, just press 9 on your phone at any time to let us know that you would like to ask a question. I'd like to get started by introducing our special guest. First, we have Adele London with the U.S. Census Bureau. Adele, would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight?
Sure. Hi, Janine, and I am Adele London. I'm a partnership specialist with the Atlanta region for the United States Census Bureau. I just want to say thank you to Fair Count and Pluribus Unum for including me in this critical conversation, as the days to be counted in the 2020 census are just about over. We have about 2 weeks left, so I just want to stress that. I am a mother, I'm a daughter, I am a sister of the census, and I'm super excited to be on this call with such phenomenal women.
Thank you so much, Adele. For those of you just joining the call, you are on a live telephone town hall conversation discussing the 2020 census and what it means for Black women and families across Louisiana. We want to hear your questions and concerns, so just press 9 to raise your hand and ask a question. I'm turning now to introduce our next special guest, Ashley Shelton with the Power Coalition. Ashley, would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight?
Absolutely. Good evening. I am so excited to be here to talk to you about the census. We have been working all over the state of Louisiana to engage as many people as possible, and so I've been talking about it for the last 6 months, and we're going to keep talking about it until we get as many folks to take the census as possible.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you. We are delighted to have so many of you join us for this call this evening as we discuss the 2020 census and the need to ensure that Black women are counted this year. If you would like to get in line to ask a question, press 9 on your phone. Our next special guest is Nicole Jolly with the Urban League of Louisiana. Nicole, would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight?
Yes, good evening, and thank you, Janine. I'm grateful to be on the call this evening, but even more grateful to have been able to work with Fair Count for almost the past year, which has truly been a joy, and for our ongoing partnership that the Urban League of Louisiana has with Pluribus Unum. And I definitely want to shout out the sisters on the call who have been such great support throughout this entire census process, and who are all just tireless advocates in our fight for an accurate count. So thank you to my co-panelists, and thank you for stopping in Louisiana and for including me.
Thank you, Nicole. We are delighted to have over 3,000 people on the call right now. If you would like to get in line to ask one of our distinguished guests a question, please press 9 on your phone at any time. In addition to your live questions, we will have a few poll questions about the 2020 census that all of you can weigh in on. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Mama Jamila with the Ashe Cultural Center. Mama Jamila, would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight?
Good evening, family. And as you see, my name is Mama Jamila. I work with the Ashe Cultural Arts Center. I'm also a cultural artist, great-grandmother of 11, grandmother of 7, and mother of 3. All of my children, and if you call me mama, you're one of my children. All of my children need to be counted. So step up, Louisiana. Thank you for having this important call tonight.
Thank you, Mama Jamila. And thank you to all of those on the line for joining us for this interactive conversation with leaders from across Louisiana. Please press 9 on your phone if you want to ask a question. The Urban Institute estimated that over 1.7 million Black people could be undercounted in the 2020 census. At varying amounts in each state, the undercount of 1.7 million Black people could result in a loss of over $3 billion in federal funding every year for the next 10 years. Sisters for the Census is a joint civic engagement campaign with the National Council of Negro Women and Fair Count. And we are working to ensure that Black women, children, and families are fairly and accurately counted in the 2020 census. We still have a couple of more guests to introduce. Dr. Vanessa Gatlin is our next guest. Dr. Gatlin, would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Janine. My appreciation to you and Fair Count for this opportunity. It is absolutely a thrilling opportunity for this time of conversation and collaboration as we look forward to the success of the census here in Louisiana. We will not be last, sisters, but we will be counted. And I'm looking forward to continuing to work with all of you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Gatlin. So we are going to, before we go to your live questions, I'd like to ask a poll question. Each participant can answer by pressing a button on your phone, and we'll share the results in a couple of minutes. Please wait to hear all of the answers before you press a button. So our first poll question is, how many people on tonight's call have already completed the 2020 census? Press 1 if yes, you have completed the 2020 census, and 2 if you have not completed the 2020 census. We'll give you a few more seconds to answer this question. So press 1 if you have completed the census, and press 2 if you have not completed the census. For those of you just joining this conversation with Louisiana leaders, you can be a part of this discussion by pressing 9 on your phone. So we'll give it a couple more seconds. All right. And so the results of our first poll question indicate that 88% of our callers or our participants have completed the census. All right, that's absolutely fantastic news. And 12% have not completed the census. And so we hope to change that before the end of the night. And so I want to ask Adele to respond, to these results. What is this 88% that have and the 12% that haven't? As a member of a staff member of the Census Bureau, how does this make you feel to hear these results in your state of Louisiana?
I'm super excited about that. Actually, that I was glad to hear it. We have some really strong, civic-minded folks that have been working tirelessly for the past year. So that's good. I'm glad that we still have that engagement. But that also tells me that we have a little work to do. So and I'm subscribed to the each one, not, you hear the saying, each one get one, but I want each one to get 10. So that 88% that has done their census, let's get it going and keep it moving and get your family and friends counted. So that's good news, actually.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I hope that by the end of this call, we have convinced the other 12% to go ahead and complete the census tonight. So we are glad that thousands of you have taken time to join us tonight for this discussion on the critical importance of the 2020 census and what it means for Black women more specifically. We want to hear your questions for our special guest tonight. So press 9 on your phone to get in line to ask a question. Faircount is thrilled to partner with Pluribus Unum on this virtual bus tour, which is spanning across 6 states in the Southeast. So our first question goes to Nicole Jolly. The Urban League of Louisiana, along with the National Urban League, has been on the front lines to ensure hard-to-count communities are counted in 2020. The Urban League of Louisiana created VOICE, which stands for Voicing Our Information for Census Equity, and it's an initiative to encourage a successful 2020 census response rate, especially for the African American community and other communities of color, with special attention to families with young children and opportunity youth. Talk to us about why there was such an emphasis on young children.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And it is a point that we try to remind folks every time we are out talking to community members about completing their form. And the reason why is when we look at the historical data, we know that in 2010, and the 2010 census, we missed in Louisiana over 12,000 children under the age of 5. Now, when you put that together with the funding that comes with each person who is counted, that results in over $16 million over the last 10 years that could have funded critical services to help them thrive. So the 2020 census, as many folks know, helps determine which areas qualify for the critical resources that children and families depend on for the next 10 years, which is basically an entire childhood. So resources like food assistance, Head Start, childcare, housing support, public schools, early intervention services for children with special needs, children's health insurance. These are all services that the clients and participants and community members that we serve at the Urban League rely on. And we operate a Head Start Center in New Orleans. So this is funding that is just close to our mission and so important to us. So a couple of facts related to counting your children. The more complex the household is, the greater the risk that a child won't be included on a household census form. And often, for example, this is the result of children living with grandparents or other relatives or between 2 houses in a joint custody situation. So I'm going to give a few data points about Louisiana. In Louisiana, data shows that over 55,000 children live in households with someone who is not a biological or adopted parent. And when you break that down even further, 43,000 children stay with grandparents. So we specifically want grandparents to know that they should count the children staying with them on their census form when they complete it.
Thank you so much for that. I think we have to, one of the things, especially with the last point that you brought up, is that families look different. And we need to make sure that even if your family might be different from, the makeup of your family might be different from that of your neighbor, you still need to be counted. And we need to make sure that our young kids are counted so that they can have bright futures over the next decade. So thank you very much for that information, Nicole. So for those of you just joining us tonight, welcome to this interactive conversation with local leaders from across Louisiana. Press 9 if you have a question for one of our guest speakers. Our next question is for Ashley Shelton. Power Coalition is working to increase civic engagement across the state of Louisiana through various initiatives. Specifically, the focus has been on communities of color. Tell us what's at stake if communities of color are undercounted in Louisiana in 2020.
Thank you for that question. One of the things that we know about census is that it is key and critical to representation. One of the ways that people, like that our redistricting and the way that the lines are drawn is based on population. We know that our state is blacker and browner than it's been since the last census. And so oftentimes we focus on just the fact that we may be able to gain a congressional district in the state of Louisiana, but we think that there's so much more. We know that there are both in places like St. Bernard Parish, we know there are opportunities to gain not only representation in this congressional space, but also certainly in our school boards and our city councils. And so we want to be able to certainly have the voices of people of color across our state truly represented, and having the ability to elect leaders that are going to be accountable to them. And so, so the census is critical, certainly in that way. We've also most recently dealt with Hurricane Laura, and certainly we've all been praying about Hurricane Sarah, that missed the state of Louisiana. But also when we think about federal resources that are dispersed in times of disaster, a complete count, in particular of communities of color, is critical to being able to receive the resources that we need in times of disaster, so that our communities can be rebuilt and made whole. The other thing that I think is also really critical for Black and Indigenous and other people of color in our state that we have been reaching out to, for the last 6 months about how critical the census has, is to our lives, is that it also drives federal funding and programming. And so whether it be access to health care, our food programs, we think about our children, for example, in East Baton Rouge Parish, all schools in East Baton Rouge Parish provide, free lunch to all students at school. And so these are the kinds of programs that are driven by the statistics and the physical makeup of our population. And so as we think about, the census is just this thing we have to do, we have really been challenging folks that it's not just a thing that we have to do. This is really critical about driving, billions of dollars to our state, specifically to be able to continue to, kind of lift all boats and make sure that we have the things that we need in our communities, and whether that be healthcare, food access, addressing food insecurity, and so much more. We see it playing out right before our eyes as we look also too at this pandemic and, and the crisis that we're confronted with. I just remind folks that, like census and resources that we get from the federal government are really important to states like Louisiana. And especially when you're a poor state, like we need these resources, we need support from the federal government to be able to change our communities.
Yes, you are exactly right. And thank you so much for those words, Ashley. I think people need to understand that the money, when we talk about the money and the resources, whether those are for young children, whether they're for families or for schools or for healthcare or for disaster recovery, that the money follows the numbers, not the need. And so when you are in poorer states that need federal funding, if you don't get counted, the numbers aren't there. And you can need all you want, but if you don't have the data to back it up, then the money's not, those resources aren't going to come to you. And neither will political power, which is what you started off with, discussing redistricting and how that brings political power to communities across the nation. So thank you for that, Ashley. I'm going to move on. So there are so many ways that the 2020 census impacts our lives, just like Ashley and Nicole said, for the next decade and beyond, including allocating $1.5 trillion annually to states, cities, and counties across the country. 58% of African Americans live in southern states and the District of Columbia. And the southern states have the highest percentages of Black populations in the country. So what aspects of the census concern you the most? Press 9 on your phone to ask one of our panelists. So my next question goes to Adele London. Adele, thank you for the work that you are doing as a partnership specialist for the Census Bureau in Louisiana. You've been working with organizations and teams on the ground for a while now. Give us the scoop. How is Louisiana doing in comparison to other states and nationally right now in terms of response rates? And what can we do, and everyone on the call today, what can they do to increase those rates?
Okay. Currently, let's see how Louisiana is doing. Louisiana, the United States self-response rate right now is 65.9%. The total enumeration rate for the country is 91.8. Right now, Louisiana has a self-response rate of 59.1%. So we're woefully behind the national self-response rate, and as well as our total enumeration rate, which is a little better at 85.4%. That would give us we would be ranked at 46th in the United States. So we're the 46th state in self-response rates. So it's not so good there, and we're 48th in the total enumeration rate. Some good news, though, Louisiana actually is doing pretty well with the non-response follow-up operation. That's the door knocking campaign. So we're doing pretty well with that. I believe we're like number 24th in the nation with a non-response follow-up. So we do, again, have some work to do. We don't want to be, we all in Louisiana, we always say we're last in the good stuff and first in the bad stuff. But we don't want to be at the bottom of this list. We don't want to be 46th in the nation in self-response. We have to work really hard these next 2 weeks so that we can change that story. Some things that you asked about, some things that we could be doing. Some of the stuff we're doing currently already. We have some great partners that are on the phone here and some that are not. Power Coalition, Pluribus Unum, many social civic organizations, sororities and fraternities that are doing textathons, phone banking, Census car caravans, engaging folks where they are. So that would mean on social, we're looking for folks to do things on social media, conducting aggressive social media campaigns, as well as engaging people when they can in person at grocery stores, or if you're at a church gathering or in food bank lines. Those type of things that are going on in our communities, because there's limited engagement physically, so we have to be kind of creative and when we're engaging folks, but we have to really push. We have some partners who are doing talk the talk, and they have kids writing on the ground in low response areas. Complete your 2020 census today. Respond now, and writing my2020census.gov on the concrete. So we have a lot of room for creative engagement, and we're just encouraging all of our partners to really help us in this last push, this last campaign, to respond now.
Thank you, Adele. Those are some great. I wish you could take some pictures of the chalk drawings and things that the kids are doing. And so everybody heard what Adele just said. We need everybody to think about ways to get the message out. And so please, be creative and think of ways that you can encourage those in your community to get counted. For those of you just joining us, you can press 9 on your phone to ask your question. We are now going to take our first question from the audience. Our first question comes from Gwendolyn from Harvey, Louisiana. So Gwendolyn, please, you have a good question, so please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello.
Hi, Gwendolyn. How are you?
I'm good. How y'all doing?
We're doing well. What was your question?
My question is this. I completed my census, and my church does a homeless ministry. And the question that I think is important to ask, there are so many homeless people, including women and children. Are we talking to these people? How are we getting that data? Because that should affect the count too, correct?
It definitely does. Yes, it does. And yes, the Census Bureau does count homeless populations. And I'm going to turn this over to Adele to tell us about the special operations that the Census Bureau uses and what people in the community can do to help them out.
Yes, we are gearing up actually for that operation. That is a separate operation from the door knocking operation that we see in neighborhoods and the self response operation. And that actually will be starting on the 23rd. 23rd, actually. We're going to, what we have is called Tea Night. There's certain communities in Louisiana, certain parishes that have Orleans and Jefferson have the lion's share of the homeless population. So you will see a pretty large operation in those areas on the night of the 23rd. And so we have enumerators that are actually going out and enumerating the homeless people where they are. Then the follow-up days, we go to what we have what we call SBE, our service-based enumeration, and then we will be going to soup kitchens and places of that nature to engage homeless people at those shelters and things. So that is happening. It starts on the 23rd, and it's a pretty interesting operation, and I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. It'll be my first time kind of witnessing how they do it. But it is it's a very important operation to the census. In fact, it's its own separate component.
Thank you, Adele, and thank you, Gwendolyn, for that question. Adele, for churches, so Gwendolyn mentioned that her church does homeless outreach. Can they, help inform some of the census workers about where they're, or when they work with these communities, so that maybe they can, invite people to the church or have a special thing at the church to get those folks that they work with there. So when the census workers are there to do the enumeration.
So to be clear, the homeless enumeration is separate from like a mobile questionnaire system. So like at the church, yes, we could actually have census workers to come to something that they sponsored for just everyday people, like that they could we could send census workers to do that. Now, as far as the homeless enumeration, those service-based organizations have already been identified,
Gotcha.
And so they've already been scheduled. So like I said, it's a very ordered process. They've already set those schedules and for those days with those different SBEs. So yeah, so we wouldn't be able to do an enumeration for homeless people at a church, but the church can absolutely help us to vocalize that that's when that's going to happen, so they can let the homeless folks that they are engaging to know that to be on the lookout on that evening of the 23rd to the 24th, that they will likely be engaged by a census taker.
Thank you, Adele. And so we encourage you to ask your questions about the importance of a fair and accurate count in communities. And so please press 9 on your phone at any time to ask your question. So our next question is for Mama Jamila. The mission of Ashe Cultural Arts Center is to use art and culture to support human, community, and economic development. How do we use the arts to illustrate the importance of completing the census? And what type of impact does the census have on the arts?
Thank you for that important question. As we look at how the arts are affected, you know that federal funding is driven by the census. As has been brought forward, we lost a lot of the count post the 2005 federal flood. Census supports the arts in that we were all party to the CARES Act. The CARES Act brought money into our individual homes, which was vitally necessary. It helped with our unemployment. But did you know that the CARES Act also has a piece called the CARES Act for Cultural Economy? Trillions of dollars in relief funds came into states and local government, such as the National Endowment for the Arts, and in other separate funds. Institutions such as Ashe Cultural Arts Center and many of our smaller cultural arts centers, which you know are losing funding, are struggling to stay open, but perform vital services to our community. One of the mottos that I use is the fact that when you teach a child who he is, no one can tell him who he's not. Cultural Arts Center bring forth the messages of light and hope to our communities. Not that we started in slavery, in the period of enslavement, but celebrating who we are as a cultural people. We also know that culture is one of those social determinants of health that ensure the health of our community. The dollars that come in for health and wellness. Ashe is proud that we support the arts, also looking at it from a standpoint of health of our community, the wellness of our community. Louisiana, in August of this year, got approximately $1.9 billion. That money came from the U.S. Treasury, and it was based on our census count. Now, we already heard Adele say how we were inaccurately counted 10 years ago. Think of what that dollar amount would look like and how much more we could do for our children, for our elders. We support programs that Voice is Not Forgotten. We know that when our elders are engaged, they then stay healthier longer. So those federal dollars support such programs as that. When we, as a small cultural arts center, apply to the National Endowment of Arts for grants, it helps us to then be able to bring services to our communities. Ashe is proud to say that we bought on very early and set up our station so that every event that we had at Ashe, and we host about 1,000 events pre-COVID a year, but at every event that we had signed up for the census because we know those dollars help to keep our doors open, and that arts and culture help to keep our community alive and ensure that our children have a vision of who we are from a lens of who we were and who we can be. And I want to add an additional caveat. For many of us as people of African descent, as we attempt to trace our cultural lineage and go back and see who were those that came before us, the census counts, even back into our periods of enslavement, are the documents that we use to find out who was my great-great-great-grandmother, where did she come from, and where did she live. So being counted in the census is vitally important to us as a people and as a cultural people, and Ashe totally supports that.
Woo, Mama Jamila, I'll tell you, I've been on mute, but I have been vocalizing. You just dropped about 13,000 gems right there, and I don't even know how to follow that up. I do know that the Ashe Cultural Center did a powerful census video, and so I encourage everyone to go online and find that video and watch it. It was just truly powerful. So thank you so much, Mama Jamila, for that. For those of you who are just joining us tonight, welcome to this interactive conversation with local leaders from across Louisiana. Please press 9 if you have a question for one of our guests. I have a question for Dr. Vanessa Gatlin. Black women have been the backbone of our communities for generations. Whenever there is a need, Black women show up, and the 2020 census has been no different. How do you see Black women organize and mobilize the census around the census in Louisiana?
Thank you for this opportunity to lift up the Black women who are always and will always be the backbone of our community down through the years. 1865, William Ross penned the poem the hand that rocks the cradle. And we know in that poem he said that that's the hand that rules the world. Motherhood is the preeminent force that we need for change in our state here in Louisiana. And I do believe that black women are still the backbone, and I believe that we have great influence. In fact, we probably have a greater level of influence than we are really aware of. I have seen women who are canvassing our communities. They're the foot soldiers. They're going from door to door. I've seen others who have embraced this by using their community civic groups to get this message across to everybody. We're even having those who are having COVID-19 testing sites. And along with the COVID-19 testing are those people who are there trying to encourage everybody to please fill out the census. And then we are finding the greatest marketing weapon that we have is when we vocalize how we feel to each other. I see people who are vocalizing to their friends, their relatives, their church members, their civic groups, and what they're saying is, listen, I have filled out my census. I have been asking people, have you filled out your census? Well, I said, listen, it's not going to take you 5 minutes. It's so important. We speak the language. And so as we speak the language, then we have to find ourselves using our creative ability, talents, and gifts so that we're able to get the word out in a creative format. Our people are so prone to feel that everything that's presented to them has a hidden agenda. And so we must make sure that as black women, we are giving them correct information about all of the resources that we're going to miss for our children, for our health, our arts, our cultural well-being, and for our well-being whenever there is disaster in our areas. And who best but the black woman? And so black women are doing what they need to do. And who can text better than we can at our food banks? When people are coming, we're encouraging them, please fill out your census. And so I'm saying to everybody, use your personal level of influence. And as we encourage others, I'm agreeing with the other participants on this panel, these great, phenomenal women. I do not want to see Louisiana at the bottom. I want to see us rise to the top. I want to see our educational system to be number one. I want to see our children have every advantage that they deserve. I want to see us, when we're in need, not to continue to be in need and to live like second-class citizens, but to always have what we need. So I'm employing everybody to use your personal level of influence, continue church groups, continue civic groups, sororities and fraternities, continue COVID-19 testing sites, and let's continue so that we can get rid of the deficit in programs, because if we don't, we're going to face it for another decade. We cannot afford to sleep on this moment. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, we cannot. We cannot afford to sleep. And everybody out there you are a trusted voice to someone. And so please listen to the women that you've heard on this call. Listen and go out and tell somebody else about taking the census and why it is so important. Thank you so much for those powerful words, Dr. Gatlin. We are now going to move on to another poll question. Each participant can answer by pressing a button on your phone, and we'll share the results in a couple of minutes. Please wait to hear all of the answers before you press a button. So our second poll question is, what are some of the concerns that you think people in your community have with completing the 2020 census? Press 1 if you think there are privacy and security concerns. Press 2 if you think there is suspicion of the government. Press 3 if you think there is a lack of interest. And press 4 if you think there is a lack of understanding of the importance. We'll give you a few more seconds to answer this question. And so again, the question is, what are some of the concerns that you think people in your community have with completing the 2020 census? Press 1 if you think there are privacy and security concerns. Press 2 if you think it's suspicion of the government. Press 3 if you think it is a lack of interest. And press 4 if you think there is a lack of understanding of the importance. For those of you just joining this conversation with local leaders from across Louisiana, you can be a part of this discussion by pressing 9 on your phone. We're now going to take a question from the audience. So this question is from Betty Jacob from Houghton, Louisiana. Betty, are you on the line?
I'm here.
Hi, Betty. What is your question? And thank you for joining us.
My brother and I share the same address. Although he lives in a mobile home behind me, I called and asked the census reporter if he could claim his own census, and she said no, because we shared the same address. I thought that if he could prove that he lived in a different home but had the same mailbox, that he should be able to file his census.
All right. I'm going to turn this over to our partnership specialist, Adele, to answer that question.
Yes, the ACO responded correctly in that you would have, if the address, it's what the address is in the census database. So if you all share the same address, you will have to respond collectively. Now, for 20, if because it's a separate unit, what you would do is work to get that as a separate address. You need to get a separate address for the mobile unit. For the 2030 census, then you will have two separate responses. It's we've had some of that to happen, like in New Orleans, where you had a home that was a single family, and then it became a double, or there was a double, became a single family unit. But again, it's at this point, if it's recorded as one address, it's that you all are both at that one address, then you have to respond together.
Thank you, Adele. I think we all, especially some of us that are from more rural areas, I think you'll get a lot of that where you have 2 or 3 houses that all have the same mailbox. That's how my grandma and them in South Mississippi were set up. And so it's good to get that clarification. Thank you so much, Adele. All right, we have another question that is coming from, let's go to Peggy Osborne in Quitman, Louisiana. Peggy,
yes.
Are you on the line?
Yes,
Hello, thank you for joining us. What is your question?
My question is there a real big difference between getting federal aid for northern Louisiana versus southern Louisiana?
I'll turn that over to either Nicole or Ashley to answer that.
Well, this is Ashley. I'll jump in real quick. I mean, I think in terms of, like federal aid, like in every disaster in our state, it depends on how the disaster, the areas that they determine have been impacted, right? So, and so typically, like, using Laura as an example, it kind of tore through, Southwest Louisiana, Cameron and Calcasieu parishes, but then it made its way through Alexandria and Shreveport, causing significant damage. And when we think about federal resources, that come down to help, that's why we're saying, like, it really is about population and then being able to understand how many people are impacted in each of those parishes that were named in the disaster. And so, and so I think that, sometimes people think that, more money goes one place or the other, but the reality is that it's really about what places are actually are named in the disaster declaration, And then I think the other piece is that, like, so if you look at like a New Orleans versus a Shreveport, New Orleans is much more densely, populated. And, and I always remind folks too that like so much of the state's population actually lives, kind of in South Louisiana proportionally, but, certainly, being impacted by a storm doesn't change that. And so the census becomes so critical so that we can get the right allotment of dollars so that we can touch as many lives as possible to make people whole. And so there's not really a difference. It's just about which parishes actually get declared in the disaster, and then that declaration then determines the amount of money that's given in that disaster to that particular community that's been impacted certainly is informed by the census. And so that's why we're asking folks, to take the census, because again, in our state, our ability to be, fully counted is so critical in so many ways, but in particular, when we think about disaster relief and recovery, and we're seeing some frustration around FEMA, being able to respond, as quickly and as appropriately as they should. But, again, all of these things, they're trying to gather all the data points to be able to support community. And so I'll just leave it there. But, but actually, again, like the resources and who gets them, some of that's determined by what areas are actually declared in the disaster. And then once they make that declaration, they go to the communities that were impacted. And so then that also speaks to your local leadership as well, leadership across the line. One of the things we've been telling folks is that, census and voting and kind of these bedrocks of democracy are truly social determinants of health. And so, as you've seen, our congressional body, our senators, or, they have not been able to come to consensus on a relief package as it relates to COVID. We are, Laura happened, and we've seen it fall from the headlines. But what we know is that, your local, state, and federal elected officials are determining what dollars, who's fighting hard enough for the dollars that we need, to recover our communities. And so we always remind folks that, again, census goes, directly back to literally, one voice, one vote, one voice, and also your representation. And so when you end up living in a district that doesn't have true voice or neuters the voice of Black voters in those communities, like that's, again, why the count matters so much. And so I'll leave it there. But, but happy to also share some additional resources around disaster, relief and recovery.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And thank you for your question. We are going to go back to our poll results. And so the question was, what were some of the concerns that you think people in your community have regarding completing the census? And so say that 13% think that there are concerns about around privacy and security. 16% believe that it is a suspicion of the government. 13% believe there is a lack of interest, and the majority of our participants, 59%, believe there is a lack of understanding of the importance of the census. And so I'm going to turn this over to Nicole and just get some, what do you think about those results? Is this what you've been seeing over the past year or more that you've been working and trying to get people to complete the census?
Yes, and I'm glad you came to me because I really wanted to speak to this. I think this just makes me think of some of the early trainings that we were doing, and Adele, you might remember this. So you mentioned, Janine, at the beginning that one of our focuses at the Urban League is on opportunity youth, or essentially young adults who are disconnected from work and school. And part of the reason for that is that that's a group of folks who would potentially be completing the census for their first time. So it's young adults who have not maybe not lived on their own or been responsible for completing their form. And I was reminded by some of our young adult leaders that this is just all brand new to them. Like, they came into our trainings and were honestly having a hard time following along because even the term census and trying to understand what it was just a foreign thing to them. So I think it's just important that we are not just reaching out to the folks who might be in our closest network, but thinking about who we can reach that will not already have this information readily at hand, and especially the folks who we know this might be their first time completing the form. And we know in Louisiana, especially New Orleans, we have a history of undercount, which means less of our residents have participated in the past, right? So it just means that there's an even greater learning curve. And it reminds us that this is not something that we can wait until the year of the census to start talking about. So the work we're doing now is just as important to this year as it will be 10 years from now when we're doing this all again, because we need folks to know about it all along the way so that in 2030, part of the work is already done.
Thank you. Definitely, Nicole. Thank you for that.
Janine, can I jump in for just a second just to I just wanted to make a comment about that. Amen to everything you said, Nicole. And we are concerned about that. And we are actually working right now with the Louisiana Department of Education, actually to include what we call this is a census curriculum called Statistics in Schools. And it's an excellent program. And Janine, you're familiar with it. But a lot of people aren't. And we're really working at not just waiting till a year or a few months before the census we're conducting the census to educate folks. So we're trying to incorporate that, and that's something that we're working on. It's not fully baked, but we're trying to incorporate it into our schools so that kids will know and grow up knowing the term census. Because like Nicole mentioned, many people had never even heard of it. So that's something that we're really trying to change for the 2030 census.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the census needs to be just as ubiquitous as voting. It needs to be, people need to talk about it just as much as they talk about voting, and that's what we hope happens over the next decade as well. So we're going to have another question from the audience. The next question is from Mary Joseph from New Orleans, Louisiana. Mary, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Mary. Thank you for joining us. What is your question?
My question is, what are the organizations or committees and group of people doing with the people that relocated because of from Lake Charles because of the hurricane? They are located and situated in hotels, over 12,000 people. I don't know what is the percentage of children balancing out to adults or whatever. I know looking at television with the buses being unloaded, just that one hotel, on an average, maybe 93% was black. The other percent was white. How these people are being counted for their census? Did they fill them out? Did they lose the identification because of the hurricane? I mean, they're located there. Someone can reach them without having to go out and not solicitate, but to try to knock on a door. All they have to do is go to a hotel room.
How are they? Adele, do you want to answer how the Census Bureau is counting people that have been displaced by storms?
Yes, sure. Yes, the state as well as the Atlanta region is the region that we're in. We're very, very cognizant of that. We have deployed census workers to hotels across the state to try to get folks enumerated who have not already responded. So that is actually a really top priority and something that we're doing as we speak. We have census workers driving all over the state actually to locate where those clusters of evacuees are, and we're going to be doing that till the very end.
And this is Ashley, and I'd also like to add that on the community organization side, I know, Power Coalition has been working with nonprofits on the ground like the Micah Project the United Way. They provided over 10,000, care packages to families in hotels, and within each of those packages, they allowed us to include information about the census that included a QR code that they just had to open the camera on their phone, and it would take them directly to the census website to be able to take the census. We've been also working with a lot of the feeding programs for both in Baton Rouge and New Orleans to be able to also, meet people where they are and, to be able to talk about the census and the importance of it as we think about, finding ourselves in need of support, following a disaster. And so, we've certainly been reaching out. We've certainly been providing some disaster relief and support in addition to trying to find as many easy ways to reach, people, and especially being sensitive to the fact that they are in a process of, kind of relief and recovery. But we've been proud to kind of work with many different groups across the state in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport to be able to provide aid and support and also educate about the census and voter registration.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. So each topic we address brings more and more questions from our participants from across the state. You can get in line to ask your question by pressing 9 on your phone, and you can complete the census right now by visiting my2020census.gov or don't call right now, and you can find out more information about Census in the South Road to Recovery, our virtual bus tour at censusinthesouth.org. We are now going to move to our third and final poll question before we move to some closing remarks from our guests. So our third poll question is, can we count on you to 1, tell 5 friends and family members about the importance of the 2020 census, 2, volunteer for an upcoming text bank, 3, share the importance of the census on your social media, or 4, do one or more or all of the above? So again, those questions are, can we count on you to tell 5? Press 1 if we can count on you to tell 5 friends and family members about the importance of the 2020 census. Press 2 if we can count on you to volunteer for an upcoming text bank. Press 3 if we can count on you to share the importance of the census to your friends on social media. And press 4 if we can count on you to do one or more of the above. And so we'll have a few more seconds, and then we are going to take, and then we'll take another question. So our results say that, our polling results say that we have 42% of our callers will tell 5 friends about the census. And then when you tell those 5 friends, ask them to tell 5 friends. So let's keep that going. Another 7% have said that we can count on them to volunteer for a text bank. 9% have said that we can count on them to share the importance of the census on their social media pages. And 41% have said that they will do one or more of the above. And so we are so thankful for that. And so right now we're going to take a question from Ella Mills from Rheingold, Louisiana. Ella, are you on the call?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Doing well. What is your question?
My question was about the census. That I haven't received the paper or nothing, about it. And so how do I go about being accounted? And I'm 85. I see and I walk. And but I do want to be counted as a member.
Well, Ms. Ella, I thank you so much for that question. One thing that you can do is you can actually call the Census Bureau once you get off, once our call ends. You can call the Census Bureau at 1-844-330-2020. Don't worry, I will say the number again before we close out the call. And so, yes, you can call just like you called in today. You can call and talk to somebody on the phone and be counted in the census, or you can go online. And so I will definitely say that number again for you. But thank you so much for your question. I now want to. We're going to enter our lightning round of closing comments from our special guest. And so I want to start with Ashley Shelton, just to give your closing comments, your pitch, your how do we get people counted? So we'll start with Ashley.
Wonderful. Well, again, thanks so much. This conversation has been so great, and I know, respect, and admire these women on the phone and work with them often in community. And the Power Coalition for Equity and Justice has been dedicated to working with disenfranchised communities, but also, in particular, engaging immigrant voters of color. And so we have been, phone banking and texting and talking to folks across our state for quite some while. And so we are continuing to text and phone bank through the end of the count on September 30th. If you are interested, in text messaging and or phone banking, there are, certainly many resources that are available. You can sign up on our website at powercoalition.org, and we'll get you signed up to be able to phone bank or text message. And then I also know that with Fair Counts also provides those opportunities as well. And so for us, we're just going to keep pushing hard to educate and engage as many folks as possible about how critical the census is to get the resources that we need for more vibrant communities.
Thank you, Ashley. And you can learn more at Power Coalition, so Google them. Next, we are going to go to Nicole Jolly from the Urban League of Louisiana.
Thank you. My 30-second call to action is to just ask folks on the call to make sure you are also reaching out to the young adults in your life who may not be aware of what the census is, or who this may just be the first time that they are responsible for completing it for their household. So think about those folks as you are doing your own outreach, please.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Nicole. Next, we will go to Dr. Vanessa Gatlin.
Thank you so much for this excellent opportunity this evening with all of the other wonderful panelists. And as women of color, let me encourage you. The 12%, please complete your census tonight. Be an intricate part of our progress. And two things I want you to remember. We must be unselfish and proactive. We can't cry after it's over. We can't cry when the resources are not there for our children, when they're not there for our health concerns, when they're not there for our communities. So let's be unselfish and proactive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gatlin. Next, we will have Adele London from the Census Bureau.
Hi. Oh, thank you, Janine. Pluribus Unum and a Fair Count for including me in this phenomenal census for the census discussion. I've been stomping for the census for a little minute now. But I can't stop now. I can't get weary. And being on this panel has really energized me and brought back that initial enthusiasm I had around the census. So I just want to thank you all on a personal level for just including me and giving me this my own call to action to really finish strong. I want to thank our many partners who've worked tirelessly pushing the good news and the message of the census and educating our folks out there. But I want to challenge my fellow Louisianians to imagine. I want us to imagine a Louisiana that had enough. And I keep writing that word down, enough. What is enough? Enough resources, enough funding for quality health care, for quality child care, education, streets and roads. What would that look like if Louisiana had enough? So I say respond to the census like our state, our cities, our parishes, our communities depend on it because it does. We all depend upon the census. The data that the census provides informs so much that we all depend on every single day. And there's power in this sisterhood. There's power. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta, so I believe in sisterhood. And when we get a good bunch of women together, we can move some mountains. So us mothers and mamas and mavens, community mavens, let's move our communities to respond to the census today.
All right.
So let's do it. Let's do it, Louisiana. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yes. Thank you, Adele. And last but certainly not least, Mama Jamila.
Thank you so much for bringing this critical and important information. But I want to piggyback on what Adele said about power. Sisters, Black women, don't forget our power. We are able to change the tides of Louisiana. We are able to change our homes. And it is critical that we do as we have always done. We reach out into our community. We are the mothers of many, the aunties, the nanans. We are the ones that push the needle. And we cannot afford to disappear. And if we disappear economically, we will soon disappear as a people. We have to be counted. And it's on each and every one of us to remember the power of our voices and get others to be counted today. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. And I know what we can do when we put our minds to it. So we have our marching orders, sisters. Let's go.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much. So for everyone that's on the call, you can complete the census now by visiting my2020census.gov or by calling 1-844-330-2020. That's my2020census.gov or by calling 1-844-330-2020. And you can find out more information about our Census in the South Road to Recovery virtual bus tour by visiting censusinthesouth.org. If you wait a second at the very end of this call, you will be able to leave a message detailing why the 2020 census is important to you. Again, on behalf of Fair Count, Pluribus Unum, and our special guests, thank you for joining tonight's call. Have a great night. We have our marching orders, and let's go get ourselves and our communities counted. Thank you, and good night.